Kailangan ng dalawang kahon, nilalamon natin nila hasta mo katol. Gusto ko namang hamon, kailan magkakaroon. Inimbis na pataranta, pati maghinahon. Magdiwang at magsalo-salo sa ganito sitwasyon. Manatili ka sa bahay, mas ligas ka ron. Sumunod sa alituntunin, dahil ang magsisi, lagi na sa dulo. Minsan ang kapahamakan, wala sa virus, kundi sa katigasan ng ulo. Walang turuan, dapat ang tulungan, dahil yun ang pinakamaigi. Gas kamay sa lababo, hindi sa paninisi, habaan ng pisi. Basahin mo mabuti, nakita mo balita, bago mo ikala, dapat manigurado. Pag hindi ka naging responsable, magigimit siya ng bagong pagkatalo. Simulan mo sa'yo ang pagbabago, pangako sa'yo may mababago. Kapag ang tama, minamasama, iba ka nalang layunin, hindi yung mga tao. Basta sumunod ka, kumonsulta, saka mong pumunta, dapat nga malugod ka. Dahil may mga taong handang ialik ang ilang buhay para hindi ka madapuan ng sakit. Wala yung kapalit upang yumakamit, di ka sa buhay, dito sa kalagitnaan ng panahon ng krisis, hindi dapat ibinawaglit. Saludo sa mga frontline ng ating bayan. Di lang sila, lahat tayo ay may kinalaman. Huwag mo hayaang malantakan na parang halaman. Binigyan mo ang iyong sarili ng kaalaman. Wala munang hahawak ng bola, beso-beso kay lolo't lola. Baka hindi lang paggalang ang maipasa mo, coronavirus. Iwan sa labas ang nice shoes, imbis na magchichirya, right foot, veg and fruits. At kapag nasunod mo ng lahat, ikaw pa'y alanganin. Alanganin na kontrol, idaan mo na sa panalangin. At nakalimang napapahamak, tandaan mong di ka dapat na matakot. Dapat sumunod ka sa kanyang utos, sa dakilang manggagamot.
Mga kababayan, naharap na naman po tayo sa mabigat na pagsubok na ito. Ito yung COVID-19.
I hope everyone's okay. I hope everyone's safe.
Nandito po kami para hikayatin pa po kayo na maging matibay.
Mas maging matatag po tayo and just stay positive po sa lahat po ng nangyayari ngayon.
Mga mahal kong kababayan, lampasan po natin, pagtagumpayan po natin ang pagsubok na ito.
Stay strong sa panahon po na to.
Huwag tayong mawawalan ng pag-asa.
At inihikayat din po namin kayo na sana makinig po tayo sa ating gobyerno.
Sumunod muna tayo sa gobyerno dahil yun yung pinakamainam na paraan para hindi na lumagana pa yung virus.
Let's all stay at home.
Spend time with our loved ones, with our families.
At higit po sa lahat, make sure to pray for everyone, pray for everything that is going on right now, especially our frontliners po who are sacrificing their lives to take care of everything.
Higit sa lahat, patuloy tayong lumapit, magtiwala at manalangin sa ating Panginoong Diyos.
Lagi tayong manalangin dahil yung po ang may pinaka-mainam na solusyon sa lahat po ng mga problema natin.
God bless you and your family. Please stay strong and keep our faith.
Tuloy po ang laban.
Ein sonniger Tag heute hier in Berlin vor dem Bundestag. Ich bin Irene Juliet Arzadon und möchte diese Gelegenheit nutzen, um ein paar Worte mit euch zu teilen. An alle Menschen da draußen. In dieser Zeit lasst uns nicht vergessen, den Menschen zu danken, die ihr Leben für uns opfern. Sei es die Menschen, die im Krankenhaus arbeiten, in den Altenheimen sowie in den Arztpraxen, aber auch an die Menschen, die im Lebensmittelhandel sich befinden. Die Kassierer. Manchmal reicht es aus, um ihnen ein freundliches Lächeln zu geben. Denn die Menschen, die heute am Arbeiten sind, weil sie nicht so wie einige von uns zu Hause bleiben können, die sollten wir wertschätzen. Ihnen sollten wir unseren Dank ausrichten. Darum lasst uns noch mehr zusammenhalten. Sie wertschätzen.
This program is brought to you by SMC Infrastructure, building a better world.
Hello, Mama Angeles. We're moving to the next stage of the pandemic, and as the world resets to the new normal, we find ourselves seeking the right balance between health and livelihood, constantly adjusting the boundaries between liberty and responsibility. Here are tonight's news. The World Health Organization said that the coronavirus pandemic situation was worsening around the globe as it warned against complacency. The WHO said it had recorded its highest daily tally of new infections with COVID-19 raging in the America. Take a look.
Improving globally.
Today is
Almost 7 million cases of COVID-19 have now been reported to WHO, and almost 400,000 deaths. Although the situation in Europe is improving, globally it's worsening. More than 100,000 cases have been reported on 9 of the past 10 days. Yesterday, more than 136 cases were reported, the most in a single day so far. Almost 75% of yesterday's cases come from 10 countries, mostly in the Americas and South Asia. Most countries in the African region are still experiencing an increase in the number of COVID-19 cases, with some reporting cases in new geographic areas, although most countries in the region have less than 1,000 cases. We also see increasing numbers of cases in parts of Eastern Europe and Central Asia. At the same time, we're encouraged that several countries around the world are seeing positive signs. In these countries, the biggest threat now is complacency. Results from studies to see how much of the population has been exposed to the virus show that most people globally are still susceptible to infection.
So as Mike was saying, we need to focus on the now. This is far from over.
I know many of us would like this to be over, and I know many situations are seeing positive signs, but it is far from over. And we need to shore up our activities. We need to build up the activities in the infrastructure that is not in place in many countries and continues to not be in place in many countries. And while I don't want to focus on the negative, I want to focus on the opportunity to build this workforce, build this infrastructure that isn't in place in most countries. And unfortunately, we've seen that in many countries. We're talking about the workforce of public health professionals who can carry out contact tracing. We're talking about trained medical professionals who have adequate training in respiratory diseases, specifically for COVID-19, but for infectious diseases. Looking at supplies, making sure that we have adequate personal protective equipment for every health worker on the planet that needs it. We're talking about treatments and effective, safe and effective treatments for COVID-19 and for emerging respiratory pathogens. We're talking about vaccines. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done, and we need everyone to remain focused on achieving the goal at hand, which is stopping this pandemic.
We continue to urge active surveillance to ensure the virus does not rebound, especially as mass gatherings of all kinds are starting to resume in some countries. WHO fully supports equality and the global movement against racism. We reject discrimination of all kinds. We encourage all those protesting around the world to do so safely. As much as possible, keep at least 1 meter from others. Clean your hands, cover your cough, and wear a mask if you attend a protest. We remind all people to stay home if you're sick and contact a healthcare provider.
And as mass protests for racial injustice sweep across the United States and beyond, the United Nations Health Agency urged anyone demonstrating to do so safely. The novel coronavirus has killed more than 403,000 people out of at least 7 million infected since the outbreak emerged in China last December, according to a tally from official sources compiled by AFP. It was their last chance to say goodbye. Thousands of Houston residents braved the sun and heat Monday to honor George Floyd at a public viewing full of pain and reflection. A long line of mourners, many from the city's Third Ward neighborhood where Floyd grew up, formed in the morning and grew over the course of the day. Take a look.
They could possibly die.
You know, it feels like, you want a little bit more time to just spend there and just reverence and just be around him, just kind of have a moment with him. But it is so short. But I'm definitely glad that I came. We've been in line for over about 5-6 hours, and I'm just so glad that I'm able. It was worth it.
Look at this. This is Houston, Texas. We are the melting pot of the United States, and you're seeing people here, black, white, Hispanic, Asian, Middle Eastern, European. Everybody's here, man, in peace, and to celebrate a life that should not have been lost, and to see the American spirit in action.
Meanwhile, very few people were allowed in the courtroom for Derek Chauvin's first appearance in front of the judge. But sketch artist Cedric Yunstad was one of them, and he said the accused, appearing via video, was keeping himself together while his lawyer did most of the talking. Take a look.
Today was unusual. It was a preliminary hearing, so the whole thing lasted only 10 minutes. It was very brief, very procedural, so there wasn't a lot of drama going on. But generally, it's not like what people see on TV and movies. Courtroom scenes are kind of stale and tedious, and a lot of people just sitting around talking. But you try and capture what's going on and represent it as fairly as you can, and then look for exciting moments when they happen. It was a little bit of a challenge. He was small on the TV screen, and then the TV screen was far away from where I was sitting. So, but he had a mask on, so I just tried to do the best that I could. It was more challenging than usual. Police officers, in other cases I've done where officers are testifying or being charged, you know, police, because of their training, they're very good at keeping their emotions calm and reserved in stressful situations. That's kind of part of the job. So. It's been rare in my experience to see a police officer on the stand who shows any emotion. So they're really hard to read sometimes. He was keeping himself together, and his lawyer did most of the talking, but I'm sure that he's got a lot on his mind right now with what he's facing.
Bail was set at $1 million on Monday for the Minneapolis police officer charged with the murder of George Floyd. As mourners in his hometown of Houston paid their respects, as we saw earlier, to the African-American man whose death has sparked massive protests for racial justice in the U.S. and beyond. Derek Chauvin, the white cop who was filmed pressing his knee on the handcuffed Floyd's neck for nearly 9 minutes, made his first court appearance Monday. Chauvin, 44 years old, appeared by video from a Minnesota state prison to face charges of second-degree murder, third-degree murder, and manslaughter. The 19-year-old veteran of the police force could face decades in prison if convicted. Chauvin did not enter a plea, and the Hennepin County District Court judge set his bail at $1 million with conditions, or $1.25 million without conditions. The conditions would require him to surrender his firearms, not work in law enforcement or security in any capacity, and have no contact with Floyd's family. 3 other Minneapolis policemen appeared in court last week to face a charge of aiding and abetting Floyd's murder for their roles in his arrest for allegedly passing a counterfeit $20 bill. All 4 officers, have been fired. Now, President Trump has adopted a tough approach to putting down the protests, and he had voiced his support for the police at a roundtable on law enforcement at the White House on Monday. Take a look.
Some of the things have been said about the...
There won't be defunding. There won't be dismantling of our police. And there's not going to be any disbanding of our police. Our police have been letting us live in peace, and we want to make sure we don't have any bad actors in there. And sometimes you'll see some horrible things like we witnessed recently, but 99, I say 99.9, but let's go with 99% of them are great, great people, and they've done jobs that are record-setting. They had a couple of very rough nights, and they had a third night which was not good. They abandoned their police precinct, something I've never seen before. You had a mayor that asked them to abandon, and now they've abandoned the mayor, it looks like. The opposite of far thinking. You know, you say far thinking, is that far thinking? So they had 3 really bad nights, and then I insisted on bringing in the National Guard, and all of a sudden it was like magic.
For most of our history, in fact, maybe just up to 60 years ago, the law was explicitly discriminatory and did not provide equal protection. It's only been since the early 60s that our law has actually provided equal protection to African Americans. Making sure the standards are out there, making sure they are trained, and making sure they are adhered to. And we're looking forward to working with you to get that done. The time for waiting is over. It's now incumbent on us to bring good out of bad. And we can do it, and the commitment is there in law enforcement to do it, so let's get it done.
There have been calls for police reform in the United States after George Floyd, an unarmed African-American man, died at the hands of police 2 weeks ago. President Trump has accused radical left Democrats of seeking to defund the police, but Democratic leaders didn't include any such language in their bill, and Democratic presidential nominee Joe Biden has also flatly rejected the suggestion. In Washington, Democratic House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, and 24 other lawmakers knelt in silence at the U.S. Capitol for the 8 minutes and 46 seconds that Chauvin pinned Floyd to the ground. Democrats then unveiled a wide-ranging police reform bill, one of the chief demands of demonstrators who have taken to the streets for the past 2 weeks in the most sweeping U.S. protest for racial justice since the 1968 assassination of Martin Luther King Jr. The Justice and Policing Act, introduced in both chambers of Congress, would make it easier to prosecute officers for abuse and rethink how they are recruited and trained. The city of New York, the epicenter of the American COVID-19 pandemic, begins to partially reopen, and the subway resumed full service to be able to accommodate essential workers. Take a look.
This is a Manhattan bound 7 local train. The next stop is...
So if for some reason you forgot your mask today, or it broke on your way to the subway station, or fell out of your pocket, we have extra masks for you in the booth. Just see a booth attendant and they'll give you an extra mask. We've got hand sanitizer in every station. We've got floor decals and stencils on the platforms to let you know what the proper social distance is.
The toppling of a statue of a slave trader has reignited demands for the removal of other monuments to Britain's colonial past, with further protests planned throughout the week. Erica Celestino joins us live from the UK. Erica?
Hi, Alma. How are you?
I'm good. So, Prime Minister Boris Johnson acknowledged anger at the racial injustice at his recent video address. Is that right?
Yes, that's right, Alma. The protests against racial injustice were acknowledged by UK Prime Minister Johnson, but he also warned that violence or breaking of coronavirus distancing laws are not tolerated. Let's listen in.
The death of George Floyd took place thousands of miles away, in another country, under another jurisdiction, and yet we simply cannot ignore the depth of emotion that has been triggered by that spectacle of a black man losing his life at the hands of the police. In this country and around the world, his dying words, "I can't breathe," have awakened an anger and a widespread and incontrovertible, undeniable feeling of injustice. We must also frankly acknowledge that there is so much more to do in eradicating prejudice and creating opportunity, and the government I lead is committed to that effort. And so I say, yes, you're right. We're all right to say Black Lives Matter. And to all those who have chosen to protest peacefully and who have insisted on social distancing, I say, yes, of course, I hear you, I understand. It's black and minority ethnic communities who've been at the forefront of the struggle against coronavirus, whether in healthcare or transport, social care, or any of the other essential services that have kept our country going. And his BAME communities, tragically, that have paid a disproportionate price. So no, I will not support those who flout the rules on social distancing for the obvious reason that we risk a new infection at a critical time, just as we've made huge progress.
Demonstrations have broken out across Britain following the death of George Floyd in the United States, most of them peaceful, although clashes in London left 35 police officers hurt. The London police reported making 29 arrests during a day of largely peaceful protest last Saturday that included a few scuffles with officers protecting the government district around Downing Street. Although the protests against racial injustice have been acknowledged, British Prime Minister Boris Johnson warned that he will not support those who do not follow the government's guidelines regarding social distancing, as the country is still battling the coronavirus outbreak, which has killed 40,000 people in Britain. According to AFP, Prime Minister Boris Johnson said that he will not support the ones who break the law, attack the police, or desecrate public monuments. During the demonstrations, London protesters defaced the statue of World War II leader Winston Churchill in Parliament Square, and in Bristol, southwest England, crowds pulled down a statue of a notorious local slave trader. According to Sky News, Patel said, that speaks to the acts of public disorder that actually have now become a distraction from the cause which the people are actually protesting about. That is a completely unacceptable act and speaks to the vandalism. Prime Minister Boris Johnson condemned the sporadic violence but did not directly address the toppling of the statue. Quoting what Johnson said, according to AFP, we have a democracy in this country. If you want to change the urban landscape, you can stand for election or vote for someone who will. London Mayor Sadiq Khan on Tuesday announced a review of the capital's landmarks, including statues and road names, many of which he said reflect a bygone era. We must ensure that we celebrate the achievements and diversity of all in our city, and that we commemorate those who have made London what it is. That includes questioning which legacies are being celebrated, he said. That's it. Alma, back to you.
All right. Thank you very much, Erica, for your update there in the United Kingdom. Thank you, EBC UK Bureau.
Thank you, Alma, reporting from London, United Kingdom. I am Erica Celestino, and we live in interesting times.
Moscow on Tuesday lifted a strict anti-coronavirus lockdown after more than 2 months of restrictions, as Russia reported over 6,000 deaths. The easing of restrictions was announced Monday and comes as the Kremlin is gearing up for a crucial July 1 vote that could extend President Vladimir Putin's grip on power until 2036. The 67-year-old leader also wants to stage a major World War II military parade, which was postponed because of the epidemic and rescheduled for June 24. Some critics have said that Moscow is lifting the lockdown prematurely. On Tuesday, health officials reported 8,595 new cases, 171 deaths, and the country's total death toll has reached 6,142, and the overall number of infections is 485,253, the third highest number in the world. Moscow remains the epicenter of the outbreak with 1,572 new cases. Nevertheless, Moscow Mayor Sergei Sobyanin announced on Monday that the capital's general lockdown and pass system was ending on Tuesday, allowing residents to move freely for the first time since late March. Officials say Russia's high number of cases is the result of a huge testing campaign with more than 13 million tests carried out so far, and point to Russia's relatively low mortality rate as evidence it is safe to ease lockdowns. All right, joining us live now from the Netherlands is our EBC correspondent, Malu Francisco, with her very special guest. Hello, Malu.
Oh, hi, good evening, Alma. Greetings from the Netherlands.
Good evening from
How
Manila.
are you?
Yes, and we have a very special guest. Yes, go ahead.
Yes, we're so fortunate that he has taken the time to be with us for us to know more about what's going on in Scandinavia. But just before we do that, let me just share some information. And as we have already noticed from the previous reports, European countries are lifting travel restrictions. Now let's take a quick glimpse at Scandinavia, what's going on. Well, Scandinavia, because of Sweden, the focus of the world has been there. Sweden has not adopted the lockdown strategy during the COVID-19 pandemic. At the moment, Denmark, Norway, they have announced already that they're lifting travel restrictions to some countries. Unfortunately, to their neighboring Sweden, it is still a no. No tourists from Sweden to Denmark or to Norway. However, talks are going on so that they could create the possibilities for Swedish tourists to travel to those countries. As far as Finland is concerned, there's no word yet from Finland as far as the summer plans are concerned. Well, let's get to Sweden and Denmark. They're really very close because Sweden has cities. The city of Malmö, the third major city in Sweden, they used to be reconnected historically. Before Malmö became a part of Sweden, it was part of Denmark. What you are seeing now on your screen is, if we later on, we'll be showing you the Øresund Bridge. The Øresund Bridge, actually, okay, and the Øresund Bridge is what connects the two countries, Sweden and Denmark. It connects the capital city of Denmark and the southern city of Sweden, Malmö, the third largest city in the country. This bridge opened in the year 2000 and it began its construction in mid-90s. It has enhanced cultural, economic, and educational relationships between Sweden and Denmark. However, today, because of what's going on, our guest, who teaches at the Denmark Technical University, is not able to go there and to have a face-to-face session with his doctoral students. For the moment, he will have to resort to internet connections to be able to see the work at the laboratories where he works as a senior researcher at the Danish Technical University. We have with us Dr. Asto Heiskanen, whose expertise is on analytical chemistry and nanotechnology. So Alma, I'd like to introduce to you and to our audience over there and all over the world, Dr. Asto Heiskanen.
Yes.
Arto Heiskanen. Sorry about that.
Good evening from Manila, Dr. Arto Heiskanen.
Good evening. Good evening.
Welcome to the program. Yes, go ahead, Malu.
Yes. Dr. Arto, just before we talk about what's going on in the educational field, which really is your main concern, could you just present to us what's going on in general in Sweden? Because we've been reading in some media reports that the state epidemiologist of Sweden has admitted that they've been a bit lax as far as restrictions are concerned in your country. So what are your thoughts, or what do you say to that?
Well, that is indeed what has been seen in the media. And in fact, the opposition has attacked the government very strongly, considering that they have not taken the measures that have been necessary. However, this has mainly been shown to be propaganda, and the kind of statements of the state epidemiologist have been taken out of their context when these news have been divulged. So in reality, the government is fully behind the actions and the decisions of the experts, at least present moment is the situation.
And the government is counting largely on the sense of responsibility of the Swedes, and they really trust the people. Is it still the case at this time?
Well, that could be said to be the case. Of course, it's not exactly possible to always monitor what people are doing in different parts, but I can see, for instance, difference in the behavior of people when just go into grocery stores, because none of them has been closed during this time. So instead of people rushing and taking something from the shelf and trying to push each other away, now they wait 1.5 meters away their turn before they take the bread from the shelf. So it has actually had very positive effect in the behavior of the people.
Dr. Arto, how has the current situation affected your work?
Well, that is, of course, starting from middle March, when Denmark was closed down and many other countries. So also the university where I work was closed down. But that doesn't, of course, mean that there was no work. Work just continued online. So all ongoing, for instance, I have been teaching graduate courses and supervising doctoral students. So everything just had to be converted into online version of teaching, and meetings were conducted via internet. But otherwise, business is as usual. We just needed to find and learn new forms how to conduct the work.
Oh, just a follow-up question, Dr. Arto. Before COVID-19 started wreaking havoc all over the world, how was your schedule? You live in Lund, actually, another
Yes.
city, and which is home to one of the most prestigious universities in Europe and in the world. And it says it's one of the best 100 universities in the world. Did you travel every day from your place to Copenhagen?
Yes, indeed I did. The university where I'm working in Denmark is roughly 10 miles north of center of Copenhagen, and every day from Lund I travel by bus and train, which takes 2.5 hours in one direction.
And your expertise is in the field of analytical chemistry and nanotechnology. Yes, I've heard about nanotechnology, but I don't have much idea about that. So could you just tell us how your fields of expertise come into play when we talk about fighting the pandemic?
Well, nanotechnology as such is, of course, a very broad area, and there are many different aspects. But in a simplified manner, what we could say, for instance, from my point of view, we are developing different test methods for COVID, whether to detect directly that one is infected or later on may have developed antibodies. So that is one area where we can utilize our possibilities in nanotechnology as well as so-called biodetection.
Dr. Arto, yes.
Go ahead.
Yes.
No, go ahead.
Yes, New Zealand as an example of a successful anti-coronavirus program, Cambodia as well. How would you define a successful pandemic program? What decisive measures did countries like New Zealand and Cambodia take that would be considered as, you think, as successful measures?
Well, that is indeed a fundamental question for this time, but very difficult to answer. And the real experts in epidemiology haven't been able to give any conclusive answer. Swedish policy to not have any lockdown is one way of seeing it. Other countries have had complete lockdown and been able to limit the number of deaths at this point. But what Swedish experts are expecting is that there will be a new wave of epidemic, which will then reap the toll of death, whereas in Sweden, people might be more already able to resist the sickness. But no one can say fully yet what really is correct and what is the best way.
So how are biotech companies, do you think, are responding to the coronavirus, what is the quickest lead time for pharmaceuticals, do you think, to develop vaccines and antiviral medicines, do you think?
Its estimations are that this year nothing significant will be available yet. So more than that, I mean, companies are working on that, but it is by far not possible to develop so fast. We will see probably early next year, earliest something available.
Mm-hmm. You think it's possible to have a home test kit for the coronavirus?
Well, that could be possible, and indeed they are being developed. Although right now the availability has been limited to hospitals and sites where testing primarily is being done, but indeed home testing can be one option which surely will be developed further in the future.
Mm-hmm. If we all know that the COVID-19 race for a vaccine is heating up and scientists are working at breakneck speed, if one is developed by next year, what would be the remaining challenges that we will face, like distribution, price?
Well, those are surely challenges, but the other thing is that when a vaccine is told to be developed, it doesn't mean that it is a fully functional and fully tested vaccine, and there are easily many problems and complications still arising even when the vaccine is available.
Mm-hmm. Yes, go ahead, Malu.
Okay, thank you very much. And let's go to something light this time, Alma.
Yes.
Dr. Arto is indeed an international citizen. He was born in Finland. He now lives in Sweden. Goes to work in Denmark. He lectures in different countries in Europe and in Asia. In fact, he studied at the University of the Philippines for his second degree, bachelor's degree, at the University of the Philippines, where he graduated magna cum laude, and where he was also a university scholar. Mm-hmm. He also lived in the Philippines, and I'm pretty sure, Dr. Arco, those whom you have met, well, in the Philippines, and those who know you are just eager to see how far you've gone after leaving them. But first, share with us how it was for you living and studying in the Philippines.
Well, I have to say that those are the times I'm really reminiscing and longing to be back in the Philippines. I really enjoyed my life there. So I'm not in Europe because I had to leave some place which was just a part of my life for a while. Philippines is really my home, where I feel at home, and I would want to be back, but my work keeps me out of there.
And you're married to a Filipina.
Yes,
and your children, you have 3 beautiful children.
Thank you.
And how aware are they as far as the Philippine culture is concerned?
Well, it is part of our home, so they are very much aware of that. My eldest daughter is fully fluent in speaking Tagalog as well. The youngest ones, unfortunately not, but hope is that in the future they will also be able to catch up.
So do you still remember some Filipino expressions that you have learned?
Of course, some expressions, and my wife keeps up using them at home continuously.
And you tell us those expressions. Can we hear? Can we?
Ay nako, that is what my wife is using when the children are doing something she doesn't like.
I hear Malu saying that too.
So do you sing it back to her when you don't like what she's doing?
Ay nako.
Okay. Any favorite food or places in the Philippines?
Well, my favorite food is absolutely caldereta. That is the number one. When it is prepared in Bicolano way with a lot of chili, as my wife does.
Oh.
There are many places which I like very much in the Philippines. Generally, whole area from Zambales, Pangasinan, Baguio, those ranges we have been traveling a lot, and I enjoy really.
Well, yeah, you seem to be a well-rounded person, and I know for a fact that you're not just an excellent. You have not just somebody who is great at science, but I have noticed that when your wife sent me some pictures, I noticed a cabinet full of Bibles.
Yes.
Yeah, something that is not really what they say. This is really a stereotype now, typical of a scientist like you, you know.
That is true indeed. It is my hobby to collect different translations and different old versions of the Bible.
Okay. And I think your father himself was into a religious organization.
Yes, that's right. Yes.
Okay. Can you just tell us how many Bible types do you have?
Well, right now, I actually don't know the count, but there are far over 100 to 200 different versions, but in different languages as well.
Oh, have you been able to read any of them, more or less the introduction?
The thing is that, of course, when reading the Bible, it's not primarily that you read all the versions, but what is interesting is rather how the different translations have been made and from what original manuscripts they have been taken and how the original text has been preserved. So that is rather kind of interesting to compare the different translations also between different languages.
Let's ask Alma here. She might have some follow-up before I say my thank you.
No, I think I have enough. I've questioned him enough about COVID-19 and everything, and I've learned so much about him. Thank you so much, Malu.
Oh, thank you too. Thank you so much, Dr. Arto, for taking the time.
Thank you.
And wish you all the best and all the success, and to your students, and we wish them the best too. So thanks again. And this is Marilu Francisco in the Netherlands. We live in interesting times.
All right. Thank you, Malu Francisco from the Netherlands and Dr. Arto from the Technical University of Denmark. Eagle News will be right back.
Skyway Stages 1 and 2, the elevated toll road system project, run from a section of the South Luzon Expressway from Alabang to Magallanes, Makati. The Skyway Stage 3 is an elevated expressway connecting the South Luzon Expressway through the existing Skyway Stages 1 and 2 to the North Luzon Expressway via Balintawak. Skyway Stage 4 is an 80-kilometer mixed elevated and at-grade toll road that will connect the existing Skyway system starting from the FTI section all the way to Bulacan.
Mula noon hanggang ngayon, gabay natin ang MTRCB ratings sa matalino at responsableng panonood. Sa tamang pagsunod sa MTRCB ratings, ginagawa nating ligtas at makabuluhan ang panonood ng bawat miyembro ng pamilyang Pilipino. Lumipas man ang panahon, hanggang may pamilyang Pilipino, andyan ang MTRCB.
Hong Kong marked a year since pro-democracy protests erupted as mass arrests, coronavirus bans on gatherings, and a looming national security law kept a lid on any return to citywide unrest. On Tuesday, flash mob protests were held during the lunchtime break in multiple malls, but crowds were just a few hundred strong. Take a look.
last year. So we're here just to remind the whole Hong Kong that we have been through a very tough time for the past year. And we would like the whole world to join us to purge the CCP virus from the world.
Because we don't have army and we don't have weapons, so this is the only way that we can do to tell people all over the world what we're thinking and what we are fighting for. And
we persist to participate in the protest, and Carrie Lam are willing to withdraw the law of last year. And I believe that if we continue, the government are also willing to fulfill all of the 5 demands in Hong Kong.
Wherever there is oppression, there's resistance. And the greater the oppression, usually greater the resistance. I think the people of Hong Kong, we are used to freedom. We are used to enjoying human rights and the rule of law and freedom of all kinds. And suddenly now you're telling us that you're just taking it away without asking for our permission. And I think the Hong Kong people cannot accept that.
Hong Kong City Leader Carrie Lam, an unpopular pro-Beijing appointee, was peppered with questions from reporters on Tuesday about the unrest under her tenure. Take a look.
These challenges led to the work we have on hand today. Everybody has to learn their lesson, including the SAR government, as well as LegCo members. I hope everyone would learn their lessons. Hong Kong cannot stomach such chaos. The people of Hong Kong want a peaceful and stable environment so that they can work and live here. In light of the global economic recession due to the pandemic, more than ever, we need a stable environment in order to restore the normal lives of the people. This is the collective wish of everyone over the past year. In terms of the contents of the legislation for national security law, I cannot divulge anything for the moment. Since this is work at the level of the central government, I cannot speculate on the relevant provisions. But anyone who cares about national security and Hong Kong, including legislators and the SAR government, should take this opportunity to express our views. On Hong Kong's long-standing legal principles, many people voiced the view that they hope the national security legislation would be in line with such principles. I would not go into details here, but I do encourage the expression of views. The gathering prohibition restrictions have been in place for 2 or 3 months, but very often there would be ambiguities or uncertainties among some people. We are prohibiting gatherings for the purpose of maintaining public health.
The immediate issue is to prove that one country, 2 systems works well in Hong Kong, and to prove that Hong Kong people are reasonable and sensible citizens of the People's Republic of China, that we could be trusted to continue to have our own way of life and our own way of system within the whole country.
And finally, in our news, the Iglesia Ni Cristo Church of Christ in Lancaster held an appreciation motorcade for frontliners. Love Sanchez brings us this report.
This is Love Esteban Sanchez coming to you from the city of Lancaster. Today we are in front of the Antelope Valley Hospital, wherein today we will witness an appreciation motorcade given by the Church of Christ Iglesia Ni Cristo members in the city of Lancaster. Most people return to work after Memorial Day. After the loosening stay-at-home order, These church members, on behalf of the Felix Y. Manalo Foundation, instead met at their chapel the following Tuesday morning to ready their vehicles for an appreciation motorcade.
Hi, the Church of Christ, or Iglesia ni Cristo, is doing the charitable action or activities like helping the community, because it's in the Bible that we need to love our fellow men. And one of the projects that the church administration has launched is helping our frontliners to appreciate their efforts. And we do believe in this pandemic, this situation, frontliners are the ones that really giving their life, their time to help and save people. So the Church of Christ, through our executive minister, would like to show the appreciation to our frontliners by giving them some food or appreciate their efforts, because that's one of the things we need to do for them as Christians and, of course, as true servants of God in these last days.
Their route consisted of a 1-mile drive from their house of worship to Antelope Valley Hospital, where they met together with hospital administrators and nurses specifically working the COVID-19 unit in order to thank them for their hard work during the pandemic.
The Felix Y. Manalo Foundation extends with high esteem its commendation to all medical frontliners, respective staff members here at the Antelope Valley Hospital on this day, May 26, 2020. The frontliners have been the unsung heroes amidst the COVID-19 pandemic. They're working around the clock as they risk their own lives to take care of the sick. On behalf of the Iglesia ni Cristo, Church of Christ, we thank you all for all you do.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you all. Part of the appreciation required collaboration with a local restaurant and finding a creative way to organize a luncheon for the frontliners with the present quarantine in place.
Well, Dean from the Church of Christ approached me, and he wanted to see how we could partner up with the Antelope Valley Hospital and serve them some great barbecue. Yeah, it's a no-brainer. And we kind of mapped out a way, because the hospital itself is closed because of the virus. We can't go in and we can't serve the guests, that we'll be able to maybe get some certificates to the guests and give them a chance to come back at their leisure, not today, maybe not tomorrow, when they have time enough to come down and, hopefully when our restaurants open, and sit down and have some great barbecue with us.
It's a blessing for us to be able to contribute to that. We love it.
Like my wife said, it's a godsend. So when Dean came in, like he told me, he said, hey, God led me here. He asked God to find him a location that would be able to, support, his vision going into helping out people who are, of course, risking their life to make sure that we're able to stand here today and conduct this interview. So for me, I was on board from day one.
After distributing gift certificates from Dickie's Barbecue Pit Restaurant on behalf of the Felix Y. Manalo Foundation to the frontliners and staff at the hospital, church members did 2 festive motorcade passes around the hospital's rotunda to end the event. For Eagle News in Lancaster, California, this is Laura Esteban Sanchez. We live in interesting times.
And before we close, we leave you with a word of hope. At the end of the day, there remains so much more to be grateful for. See you again tomorrow evening. Good night. I'm Alma Angeles. We live in interesting times.
This program was brought to you by SMC Infrastructure, building a better